She's in love with the devil, she's in love with Lucifer. This is her revenge for all the years.
How y'all are? I'm glad that you can join me today, I guarantee. Today is Monday, September 2nd, 2019. It's Labor Day here in America. How you doing today? How you doing tonight? And wherever you are in this great big world, I hope you're doing alright. And today, this is part 1 of my book review on Slavic Witchcraft by Natasha Helvin. And this is broken up into 2 parts because, well, to be honest with you, there's only 33 pages in the first part. The rest is nothing but spells. I kid you not. This is a 200 and some odd page book, and only 33 pages are dedicated to the introduction. So, I took some notes, as well as, like a brief summary of each chapter and section, as well as my final thoughts on this book. So enough of my yakking. Let's get to it. Chapter 1's called Pagan Christianity or Christian Paganism. The summary of this chapter is dual faith, nature, and the elements. Now, dual faith is, at least in this context, continuing the old paganism beliefs while still working and being in the new Christian faith. At least to my understanding of this book. This book is very heavily on 2 things: nature and ancestors. Now, she goes over the elementals: air, water, fire, earth. She says that, are all sacred, and they're all just as important to each other as they are individually. Section 1 is called Beliefs of the Old Faith. She goes into life in ancient Slavic territories, mostly around Russia or in Russia. Ancient pagan rites and offerings and all of that of the old Slavic people, with heavy nods to nature and the elements. Again, this book is very heavily emphasizing nature, the elements. And then she gives a brief introduction to the Slavic gods. She doesn't go into great detail, but just enough to give a basic description. And she doesn't go into all of the gods, she just goes into, I think, some of the important ones. Like Perun, Veles, Rod, Lada, Jarilio, and how old believers stuck to Perun, but when Jarilio came to replace him, there was like a faction. So, applied research on Slavic gods will be necessary if you are interested in that, to which I am. Then she goes into the next section, Conversion to Orthodox Christianity. Now, this is a brief account of when Christians entered into Russia trying to convert the pagans. This is a slow transition from paganism to Christianity and to Christian paganism. The next section is sacrificial objects, offerings. Using the pagan offerings in the time of Christianity in the places of Christian worship. Using like the little pagan things that they would give to the spirits of the dead. And, kind of like hiding in plain sight, if you will. The next section is the heart of this whole book. I'm not even joking. Similarities with voodoo. The usage of outside forces and ancestors. And she goes on to talk about, Slavic witchcraft is very similar to voodoo in regards to, you have these paganistic gods, and then when Christianity came, they implemented some of that stuff into that. And if you saw my last video, which you can see at the end of this video in the top right hand corner, I read off on the back of the book saying that she practices voodoo. So, yeah, it really shows in this book. And that just wraps up Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Slavic Magic, Power, and Sorcery. The summary of this chapter is history and folklore on the Slavic sorcerer and sorceress, as well as an introduction to magic. The first section is magical words, spelling, the usage and the importance of our words and phrases in our spell work when it's, giving, offerings to the gods for a bountiful harvest, or cursing our enemy. Our words are power. And then the next section is magical actions. Building up our spell work, taking action in our physical world alongside our spell work to make it happen. Never giving up. We may have spell failure, but we shouldn't give up. We should look at what we did wrong and improve it. The next section is talismans and amulets. Now she goes into a history and look into the usage of talismans and amulets, as well as a minor way of making them. She lists off things that we can find naturally, like witch stones or hag stones or whatever they're called, where they're round stones with a hole in them or whatever. Crystals, stuff like that. The next section is secret signs and magic symbols. This is the one where she goes into the astral world, where the magic and the ether come from. Coming down through into our reality, our world, and to tell us what we need and understanding the meaning and the forces behind them. The next section is sources of magical power. Going over where and how we get our magical powers. Now, basically the power comes from within us, but there's points of power, like ley lines, if you will. Now, she lists off 5 points of power. One is ancient ruins. Now, if you live in America, finding ancient ruins is going to be kind of hard. The closest thing we got are basic Native American territory land. That's all we got. The sun. She talks of the sun and how it's basically our real life physical incarnation of a god. The god is, both good and bad. The devil. The sun can give life as well as destroy life. Then she goes into the black sun, which I know my darker magic and left-hand path friends know a little something about with the black sun. This one I found quite interesting, and I couldn't agree more with her. Burial grounds. You hear the ancient burial grounds of Native Americans and graveyards and cemeteries, and how they're oh so haunted. Oh. Well, she goes into saying that most of these places are not as haunted as you think. And which is funny because I've heard this before. And I agree. Like, oh man, that cemetery's haunted. Well, she goes into saying that these supposed hauntings are caused by the people putting energy into the fact that they are haunted. They want it to be haunted. So they're putting this energy and creating these egregores of dead people that are there to make it haunted. Now, I'm not saying there aren't truly haunted cemeteries and burial grounds out there. No, I'm sure there are. But majority of the time, it's all going to be because of a collective energy, putting energy into that area. Just recently, I watched a wannabe ghost hunter. Him and his friend went to a graveyard, a cemetery. They brought along their little ghost box. And they were like, oh man, we're getting all kinds of answers. The wind's even blowing hard when I asked this question. I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, right. That wind was blowing when you got there. Shit like that is what makes these egregoric spirits haunt these graveyards. Like, the best way to describe it, you will know a place is truly haunted by the feel of the energy. If it's dense, heavy, and you don't feel right, then it's truly haunted. And that's just my opinion. And, you want this to be haunted, So you'll say, oh my God, the wind. Spirits are controlling the wind. Oh. And then finally, again, nature. It talks about doing your spell work in nature. Just being out in it gives you the power. The next section is, who are the sorceresses in Russia? What made a sorceress? Who were they? And how they passed on their knowledge to others. Which was actually pretty insightful, and I've seen this on an episode of Tales from the Dark Side, I believe, where a witch would pass on her power to another, and, well, that was Hollywood, so, but it gives a brief description how a sorcerer or sorceress would pass on their magic to somebody else, an apprentice. They were not allowed to write anything down. They had to remember it in verbal form. And I will say that this is written from a woman's point of view. But to be fair, Natasha does try to remain equal. She speaks of the male witch in good terms. She doesn't really say anything negative about male witches and sorcerers. She doesn't put a negative spin on it or anything like that. She just focuses more on the sorceress, and which is fine. And that goes into folklore about sorcery, how and the usage of this magic in the myth of Slavic history. Basically talking about how sorcerer and sorceresses would adapt to Christian life in these times of blending in, giving Christian offerings and taking communion and all that. Just basically blending in. As well as, how a sorcerer or sorceress could be spotted by their character and physical traits. And that ends chapter 2. So my final thoughts on this are, this book is very heavy on ancestral worship and nature and the elements. Very heavy. And in a way, which is really good, because as modern witches are coming into light, a lot of them don't really put that love and honor on their ancestors. And this is the biggest one. This book is great for the beginner, as well as the experienced. If you're experienced, buy this book. It'll help you, be like, man, I completely forgot all about that. It's good to brush up on, But for the beginner, this book is great. It will teach you will, intent, and belief. It'll teach you, that, hey, you may get things wrong, but keep trying, She makes it simplified, and that's why I love this book. She's to the point, she's blunt, but she makes it easy to understand. And if you've ever been around a Slavic person, or someone of Slavic descent, they're blunt. They get to the point. And that's what she did here. And quite frankly, she wrote this book in a way where if you are a beginner, you'll understand it. Hell, I wish I had this when I first got into Magick. But unfortunately, this book was written this year. She's not condescending. She treats you like an actual person. She talks to you like an actual person. She's not spoon-feeding you, but she's not being condescending either. Like most books you'll find in the spiritual and New Age section at your local bookstore. No, she's a real person treating you like a real person. She's not being overly dramatic. She's not being, an asshole. To the point, with information. And that's why you should buy this book. It's great for the beginner. And great for the experience to brush up on old stuff. You could take Slavic Witchcraft out of this book, and you would have the core basics of magic. And that's all I'm going to say for this part. The next part will be on the spells. So I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. If you want to come find me on social media, my links are in the description. Be sure to hit that little bell icon to stay informed. And again, this was part 1. I'll see you in part 2. I love you all. Bye.